And I am going to share my screen. Likewise, if you are interested in asking questions, I will stop a few times throughout the presentation to allow for questions. We're a small enough group that you can unmute yourself and ask questions. But if you want to put them in the chat as they occur to you, that's fine too, just so that you don't lose them as we're going through. Let me share my screen. And we will get started. 1 second. Okay. Thank you everybody for joining tonight to learn about using iNaturalist. For those who don't know me, I'm Christy Morley. I'm the senior naturalist here at Wissahickon Trails. Wissahickon Trails is a nonprofit organization based in Ambler, protecting the land and water of the upper Wissahickon Creek. We've got 12 nature preserves on about 1,300 acres of protected land, 24 miles of trails that are open to the public, and have a lot of programs like this. Encourage you to check out our website if you're not familiar with us, and see if there's any other programs or outings or events that might be of interest to you. And if you are a current supporter of ours, thank you. I always like to offer that personal thanks to our supporters. We couldn't do the work that we do without you. So thank you for being here tonight and supporting us in this effort as well. So just 4 sort of basic topics that we're going to cover tonight. A bit about what is iNaturalist, why you should use it, how to use it, and then how it works. And I know it kind of sounds a little bit odd that I'm going to hold the how it works until the end, but I have found that sometimes it's easier for people to understand how it works if they see how you use it, because then you can sort of build an understanding of where your data is going and what's going on behind the scenes. So there may be a bunch of times when I say we'll get to that in a minute, and I promise we will. But this has been the way that it has worked the best in terms of trying to explain to people how to use iNaturalist. So what is it? Well, this is the formal definition from their website: an online social network to share biodiversity information, a crowdsourced species identification system, and an organism occurrence recording tool. And those all sound like very formal definitions, and as expected from their website. We are going to go through sort of all of these things tonight, so you will understand how the online social network to share biodiversity information works, and how crowdsourcing works here, and why it's an organism recurrence recording tool. And so we'll break all of those things down. If you haven't already set up an account, you will need to set up an account to use iNaturalist. There is an app that they have called Seek, which you do not have to have an account for, but I don't really use that one very much, and the functionality is a little bit different from the main iNaturalist site. So your best bet is to set up a free account using your email. This works on both operating systems. Excuse me, so you will be able to do it from either an Android phone or an Apple phone. You can do it from a Windows computer and only use the online version. And we're going to go through both of those kinds of setups tonight, the app and the online version. And basically, whenever you're in the system, you just want to sign in with the same account information. And then your observations will sync between the mobile and the web version. So you'll be able to see what you've done all along. I do have to mention here that the app, there's now a new iNaturalist app. It literally just came out like less than a week ago. And other than this brief mention that I'm going to give you now, I'm not going to talk about the new app tonight, because the basics of what I'm covering tonight won't change in that app. They're basically upgrading some of the features, and things like batch uploading and some in-camera quick identification of things while it's in your camera view that are more like what the Seek app does. that they've moved to iNaturalist. It's a bit confusing because right now there are actually two apps. There's what the new one is called iNaturalist Next. The current one that we're going to talk about tonight, they've renamed to iNaturalist Classic. So if you haven't downloaded either one, you can download either one, and the basic functions should be the same. It's just that the iNaturalist Next version will have some additional features, some of which are kind of in beta, so they may change a little bit as the final version is developed. And I think they're kind of having users sort of test them now as they're going through this. I would imagine eventually iNaturalist Classic is probably going to go away, but I don't anticipate that happening anytime, in the near future. So just keep that in mind. At some point, you might actually have to download the newer version and start using that one. But again, if you sign in with the same login information, all of your activities will be synced across the devices and between the apps, so you shouldn't have any problems with that. Oh, the other thing I need to mention about the new version is that it's not yet available for Android. So it's only currently available for the iOS system. And again, I think that's why it's not going to go away anytime soon. So a quick history of iNaturalist. It actually started in 2008 as a final master's project for some students from UC Berkeley School of Information. And it kind of grew over the years. Eventually, it got it got joined with California Academy of Sciences, and then it got joined with National Geographic, largely just because the system needed more support. So many people were starting to put observations in, and it was collecting so much data, and storage became an issue, and all the things that go with sort of running an app and a website and this massive behind-the-scenes biodiversity database of things from around the world. And so as it kept growing, they needed more support. I actually need to update this slide because they have since also now become a full nonprofit organization. And so they look for support from users and ask users if they are able to make a small contribution. I give them like $15 a year just because I think it's a great system, and I want to make sure that they continue to go and do what they're doing because it's very useful on a variety of levels for me. So I encourage you to check that out. Make a donation if you can. Doesn't have to be much, but just enough so that they know that people are out there and continuing to support them. A couple of other things to mention here, that it is global in coverage. So if you travel and you are someplace else around the world, you can absolutely collect things that you can put into iNaturalist as an observation. It is 100% free. You do not have to make a donation to use it. There are a number of educator resources. There are a number of other tutorials that they have on their site that can go a little bit deeper into some of the aspects that we might not have time for. Well, I know we won't have time here for tonight. If there's things that you want to dive a little bit deeper into, they have loads of resources on their websites. If you're an educator, a homeschooler, all of those things, there's resources on there for you as well. And it's open access. So if you're a programmer, have some programming experience, would like to get involved with the programming side of things, that is available as well. And if you're not and you just want to enjoy the system, that's fine too. So the whole idea behind this of sharing biodiversity information is really important. And when this is actually from a presentation that the folks at iNaturalist put together a number of years ago, and that they used in their training materials. And I think it really sums up perfectly why having an understanding of what's out there isn't important. This quote about we can't protect and manage what we don't know. And that is so true. And in this small little picture here with the sunglasses for scale, there's 7 different plants growing that they've identified here. And if you don't know it's there, you can't protect it. And so it's really important to collect that information and share that so that everybody's aware of what's out there. And it's amazing the number of new things that have been found before and documented through iNaturalist. When we get to the website portion, you'll see that there's a forum on there, and they have a blog, and they talk about if you follow iNaturalist on social media, they will often share when like a first time observation of something from a country, on the other side of the world, ends up in iNaturalist. And I think it's really cool to see some of those small things that we wouldn't notice and we wouldn't know about if they didn't get put into a system like this. So that's a really important reason why behind the use of it, and one of the important reasons why. I'm going to talk about a couple of others as we go through here. But you heard me mention the word observations, and observations are absolutely the lifeblood of iNaturalist. So for iNaturalist, an observation records an encounter with an individual organism at a particular time and location. And so something that's important to keep in mind is that repeated observations of the same species are completely acceptable. Don't think you only have to put something in once. It's important to know if you saw a species at another location or you saw that same species at another time of the year. And this what gets to that organism recurrence recording tool that they talk about as being one of the functions of iNaturalist. And that's really important because we need to know how often things are seen, what times of the year they're seen, and at what locations they're seen. So you can put, I'm going to say, duplicate things in, but they're not really duplicates if they're at a different location or different time. So you want to try to use it as often as you can because all of that information helps create the system that works. And I will mention, the system's now at 17 years old, I think. Yeah, 17 years old. And it's only really been in the last 5 to 7 years-ish that it's gotten really, really good. Before that, it was really hit or miss on some of the identification things, and it was a little slow, and it didn't always work the way you wanted it to work, and there were bits and pieces that worked really well and other things that not so great. And now it is a really good system, and I think that sort of massive influx of data has helped train the system behind the scenes, so it's even better at helping you make identifications and correctly identify things the first time around, which is a really, really helpful tool. And that's only happened much more recently, and largely because so much data has come into the system. So there are a few important elements of an observation. You need to have an iNaturalist account, so the who you are. You can't put an observation in without an account. You need to put in when you saw it, so a date of when you saw it, not when you put it in iNaturalist, and you'll see how you could mistake the two when we get to the online version in a second. But when you saw the whatever you saw, in this case a bird, when you saw the bird, and you definitely can add historical data. So if you're a photographer and you have bird photos from 20 years ago that you have sitting in your files on your computer, and you know where they came from, you can absolutely upload those to iNaturalist. And I would encourage you to do so if you have pictures of insects or flowers and you know where they were located, and you have a date for when the photo was taken, you can absolutely put that information into iNaturalist. You need to know where you saw it. So here it shows as a map. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. You need to have evidence of what you saw. You have to have either a photo or a sound file. You can't use a video. They're just too intensive storage-wise for iNaturalist to deal with, but you can take a screenshot from your video and upload that as an image. That's actually what I've done for our example for the website in a little bit. But unlike anybody who's familiar with eBird, you can put a photo in eBird, you can put sound recordings in eBird, but you can also just put a list of the birds that you saw in eBird. And it's sort of the honor system. And you can technically do that in iNaturalist, But that's not really what the system is for. They really want evidence of what you observed. So a photo or a sound file, you can put in, you can do a field sketch and take a photo of the field sketch and add details in the notes section down here about that observation and put that in as well. They might not get moved to research grade, which we'll talk about that in a second, but you can use that as a tool for sort of capturing that kind of information. And sometimes that can be just as important. We don't have our cameras with us all the time. Some things are difficult to photograph at best. And so, you know, if there's something that you can make a good field sketch of and you can add some detailed notes about that observation, I would encourage you to go ahead and put that in as well. You need to add the details. So this is basically just the what did you see and picking the species that goes with that identification. We're going to talk about how to do that in a second. And then any notes that you might have about that observation. The community ID we will talk about as we go through it. This is the crowdsourcing part of this. And then you can also have a bunch of other attributes that you can pick. You can mark whether the thing was alive or dead. You can actually enter pictures of dead things. They count as evidence of the species being there. You can evidence of presence, actually, we're going to talk about on the next slide. If you know if the creature is an adult, a juvenile, so what life stage it's in, you can add those things. You can add the sex, if you know it, if you can tell it from what you're looking at. And then you can assign it to projects. And we're going to talk about projects towards the end today. But so you can capture all of this. This is the online version of what an observation looks like, an individual observation looks like, but all of the same information is available on the mobile system. So evidence of species, things like tracks, gnawing by beavers on the tree like this, shed antlers, those kinds of things, scat, those are all evidence of species. And you can take photos of those and put those in as well. It is helpful. These particular pictures are just pictures I grabbed from Flickr, but you would be better served by having something for scale in your photos. So sometimes, you know, if you just use your hand as a scale next to it, if you have a notebook, I use Field Notes notebooks and they have a built-in ruler on the back cover all the time. So you put that down next to the track that you're taking a photo of, and that helps for scale of the picture. And sometimes those kinds of things can really help for positive identification of the species. So encourage you to use those kinds of tools when you can, and think about, you know, is there a way to carry some kind of a an easily usable scale with you when you're out and hoping to, you know, take pictures that you might want to use for iNaturalist, because you never know what you might find when you're out there. So why use iNaturalist? Well, we've covered a couple of the reasons already, just in terms of assisting with that idea of biodiversity. But on a personal level, most of us use iNaturalist because we want to identify something that we saw. And honestly, that's the thing that gets most people into using iNaturalist, is because they see some flower or something and they are like, I don't know what this is, and somebody has told them about iNaturalist, and so they take a picture and then they put it in and they go from there. And it can be quite addictive, I'm going to say, because even though now a lot of the things that I'm familiar with in the area, I know what they are, I still want to put them in iNaturalist. So I have problems when I walk because I never get very far because I get very distracted by all the things that I'm finding that I want to take pictures of and put into iNaturalist. But at its most basic level, identifying something that you find in nature is sort of what most people use it for. You can also use it to find out what's being seen in an area. So say you're going someplace and you want to kind of get an idea of what things might be there. What kind of butterflies might you see? What kind of birds might you see? This is a kind of thing that you can do this. This is just a screenshot from, I think this is the area around 4 Mills, if I remember correctly. And you can sort of, all of these little dots are individual observations. The colors indicate the taxon, so plants, mammals, birds, insects. And you can click on any one of these dots and it will show you what, it'll pop up what that is, what that observation is. And then you can click on the pop-up and it'll take you to the actual observation. And you can use the filters up at the top, and we'll talk about this when we get to the website, but you can use these filters to even narrow it down. So say you're only really interested in butterflies. There's a way to look at a screen like this and tell it, I only want to see the butterflies. And then it'll give you that list. So it can be a really powerful tool that way. And then in addition to creating, contributing to the research about biodiversity and just collecting that information out there, it is contributing to research. This is a little bit old now. I couldn't actually find the database. I think they moved it. They used to have a database about all the publications that were written using results from iNaturalist. And so this is a database search of, and it's 765 different papers that have been published at this time using data that's in iNaturalist. So it is a really important source of information for researchers, and the fact that it's open source and we're all contributing to that makes a really rich repository for those researchers to work from when they're looking to find particular information and what's going on out in the world. And individually contributing to that, I think, is a really awesome reason to participate in using iNaturalist regularly. So I said I'm going to talk about projects, and projects are simply a way to pool observations from multiple observers. And they kind of tend to fall into 3 categories, and there's a little bit of overlap in these, but basically there's things like events. So City Nature Challenge, which we'll talk about in a bit, and some of you may have heard of or participated in previously. City Nature Challenge is a global event that happens on a weekend, 4 days of a weekend at the end of April. And people from all over the world are trying to collect as many observations as they can and identify as many species as they can from around the world. And so there's lots of time, there's events like that. The Bio Blitz that is going to happen in June, that's an event. They can be subject-based. So there was a project that had been started. It's actually since closed because they proved the point. But there was a project that started to look at spotted lanternfly predation in the US. So they wanted people to document evidence that birds were eating lanternflies, spiders were eating lanternflies, anything that was actually eating lanternflies in the wild, they wanted to know because there was some concern that our native populations wouldn't eat spotted lanternfly. And they were actually able to show that no, indeed, a number of different species were eating spotted lanternfly continually and regularly. And so it was a pretty cool project. But it was very specific in nature. And this is the way a lot of projects are set up, is very specific kinds of things like that. And then lastly, this is an example. I have a number of projects that run in the back for Wissahick and Trails properties and the sort of general watershed area. And these just scrape anything that somebody makes an observation in that geographic area gets into the survey. When I do a summary, I can see all the observations that people have made, so I can kind of track that. And then even though we haven't gotten to the section on using the app, when you do use the app, there is a section under, maybe hard to see my pointer down here. There's a section that's the little dots and it says more. And under there's a projects tab, and it works based on your geography. So where you're standing, it'll pop up projects that are in your area. The downside to using this in the app is sometimes there are very specific sort of rules for submitting your observations to certain projects. So like the spotted lanternfly one was like that. There were very specific things that they were looking for. And so you had to physically submit your observations to that project. And what I found about using this on the phone is that it's sometimes hard to see if there's rules about those and what those rules might be. So I find it more useful to sort of take a screenshot of the projects list that comes up if I'm in a new area. And then when I'm on the website, I can look for those projects and I can read about them in more detail to see if any of my observations fit their criteria. There'll be a lot of times, like my projects in the background, that it won't matter. Your stuff will end up in them anyway. But the ones that have specific requirements, you will have to manually send your observations to them or flag your observation to their project. Um, Occasionally, you will get researchers reaching out directly because they see your observation and they want you to add it to a project. And so if you get, it'll be usually on the website, it'll be a notification there. And if you get those, it's kind of like an email within the system. If you get it, I encourage you to please add your observation to their project, because it helps them do the work that they're trying to do. And occasionally, curators of projects can add your observations themselves. And I'm not sure what the distinction is, unless iNaturalist changed something in the background. And I haven't really dug into that, but I noticed I've gotten a lot of notifications lately where there's a project now called Pollinator Interactions on Plants of the Northeast US. And I keep getting notifications that my observation of a bee on a flower has been added. And then it gets tagged with an interaction of an insect or a bee with the flower and what the flower identification is. So it's kind of a cool system, and it seems like it's working in the background. Obviously, somebody's doing that. Um, but you can make their life easier if you notice that your things are getting added to the project, join the project, and then you can add your own observations as well, and just get it there from the start. So I'm just going to give you a quick highlight of the Wissahickon Trails project. So you can see we capture information by preserve. Right now, our Camp Woods area preserve is leading in the number of observations. And this this is funny. It's largely because we have an Caterpillars Count site community science project there. And the person that was doing it this last year put in a lot of photos into iNaturalist from their plant surveys. We basically are knocking insects off of tree branches and identifying them. And she was really good about putting pictures in. So it got really racked up. Camp Woods used to be at the bottom of the list until this past summer, with all those Caterpillars Count observations. So that really helped. And then lastly, just real quick, whenever you click on a project's page, you can see this kind of summary information. So you can see the stats. So this is all of our preserves for all time, for whatever's been entered into the system from our preserves. 51,000 observations of 4,000 different species. And mostly it's plants and insects, which makes sense because that most people are out there taking photos with their phones. And so that's what's easy to take pictures of with your phone is insects and plants. So you can see that birds is very underrepresented in this species count. So I encourage you, if you are a photographer that has a better camera than your phone and you can get some bird pictures and put them in, any of those kinds of things that are going to increase the amount of diversity in the observations that you're making is going to help project administrators on the backside like me who are doing projects like this, because I know that there's a lot more birds out there that we're just not accounting for because of the overrepresentation of plants and insects. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to stop here for questions. Feel free to unmute and shout out. I don't think I see any, none in the chat yet. If anybody has any questions up until this point, I'm happy to answer those.
I have a question, Christy.
Sure.
Um, for projects, if I set up a project for Gwynedd Friends meeting as a location, but then I also set up a project for the BioBlitz as a specific event, does everything in the BioBlitz automatically also, does it like duplicate itself and feed itself into the location project as well?
It should, if you might have to go to the location project and tell it to pick that. It should. So my umbrella projects, because I have different locations, I have a project set up for each preserve, and then I have an umbrella project that's like select all of these preserves and put them in one place. But since yours is already only one location, it should pick it up.
Okay. And does it do it retroactively? Or do I need to go back to every observation I ever made and manually put it into the
I don't
project
think so. I think if you're doing it based on geography, um,
sort itself?
it should sort itself out. Yeah, because I never went back and put my old ones in, and they're all in the projects.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Certainly. I have a feeling that the next section is probably where we're going to get the most questions. But we're going to talk first about the app and adding an observation in the mobile system. Now, all the screenshots that I have here are all Apple iOS operating system because that's what I have. Um, it works very similarly in Android. I do know a couple of the screens look a little bit different, but I don't have easy access to an Android phone, so I don't have that to compare. But the basic principles are all the same of the kind of information that you need to put in. So when you open the iNaturalist app, you're going to get, your username, and you're going to get a list of all your observations that are in the system. And it doesn't matter whether they've been made in the mobile app or whether they've been made online. They're all going to be there. And they may have comments associated with them. And these comments are more, they're not really comments. They're that somebody has put in an identification of that thing for you. And it's easier to see on the website when we get there. But this has to do with the community and the crowdsourcing observations or crowdsourcing of the observations for identification purposes. So when you open it, you're going to get this. To make an observation, you're going to click on the observe button down here, and it's going to pop up this little menu. And you can either choose to put in something with no media, which isn't the best thing to choose for the system's purposes, but you can just make a list of the things that you saw in here. You can build a placeholder if you wanted to try to add things later. If you have a field sketch, if you have, more detailed observations, that's kind of where this would go. You can use the iNaturalist app to take the picture itself. I don't recommend this in most cases. I think you get better pictures and they're more editable or zoomable if you take the picture with your camera's photo app and then just select something from the photo library. And that's what I'm going to walk through here in a second. You can also use the system to record a sound. So if you wanted to do birds, if you didn't have a camera that took good bird pictures, you could record bird sounds and upload those as well. So if you're going to select something from your photo library, you click that button, hop into your photo library, press the selection. We're doing this bee on a flower down here from my photo library. I just click that. I get the blue identification that I've selected it. If I need to select more than one, I can do that as well. But a word of caution. If I needed to have a different view of this bee on this flower, I could select that, and that would be the same observation. But if I took 4 different bee pictures of 4 different bees, those are 4 different observations. So you need to upload each one of those bees individually. You should not select all of them here, because anything that you select in this up to 8 photos is all going to be one observation. So if you have multiple observations, if you took 4 different pictures of flowers, you need to do each one separately as 4 different observations. It is somewhat easier to do that in the web-based version of the system. I think it's just faster. I tend to do that using the web version. It saves me time in the field as well. Then I just focus in the field and taking the pictures. And then after the fact, I get home and I upload them. Sometimes using my phone, sometimes using my tablet, and sometimes just using my computer, because it's just faster that way. If I need a quick identification in the field, I really want to know what something is that I found, then I might go through this whole process. But a lot of times I just wait till I get home to do the uploading part. But select however many pictures you need for a single observation here, up to 8, and then click add, and then it'll take you to a screen that looks like this. And so you'll have a photo that's showing, and this is sort of what they call the default photo. You can choose to add another photo here. Say, realize, oh, I had another one, I wanted to select the, a different view. You can press this button and it'll take you back to your photo library, and you can make another selection. You'll notice that the date and time and location all come in automatically. I have the settings on my phone, so it allows, 1, my photos to do that, and 2, it allows iNaturalist to use that information. That is extremely helpful, because it just means that I don't have to physically manually enter that information. And that saves a lot of time if you have a lot of observations that you want to make. Geo-privacy is set to open. We're going to talk about this in a second. That is the default. But if you have a sensitive thing, an owl or a fox den or something that you don't want to like advertise the actual location of something, you can make some changes here, and it will sort of blur where the location has actually been made. So that people won't be able to go to that exact spot, which is really helpful for things that are protected, threatened, need a little bit more privacy in their lives. Captive or cultivated, this is important. It defaults to no, and really don't want to be entering things that aren't captive. Excuse me. That are captive or cultivated. You don't really want to be entering the flowers from your garden. You don't want to be entering the animals from the zoo, kind of a thing. That's not what this system is for. So you really want wild, free living things. And then you have an option here to select projects. So once you get to that screen, then you have to decide, what did you see? And when you press this button, then it's going to pop up a list of options. And it might look a little bit different depending on what you've seen. You get the, you can get the, we're pretty sure we know what this is, or you can get a lot of things that it might say, we're not entirely sure. It might give you a genus, it might not give you a genus. It might give you species, it might not give you species. And some of that depends on what you've actually submitted, or what you're submitting here, what it thinks the photo is of. And some of that can depend on how good your photo is, how clear your photo is, if it's in focus, if you have alternate views that it might need to identify something. And it can be very specific, or it can be not so specific, depending on what you give it to work with. Now, in this case, it's popped up things. This is an Eastern carpenter bee. It may be hard to see in this picture. I knew it was a carpenter bee when I took the picture, but I've made it a point of trying to, this is the first time I saw one this spring in my yard on the crocuses, and so I've made it a point of trying to get out there every year when the crocuses are blooming to see when the bees are showing up. So I knew what this was in this case, so I selected Eastern carpenter bee. When I select that button, then it automatically takes me back to this page and it now has the species filled in. And then I just click the share button at the bottom, and then I'm back to my main homepage, and you can see that that observation has now been added to the top of the list. And I'm done with that observation. If I need to edit it, I can click on it and edit it here. If I wanted to add it to a project, if I realized I wanted to make a comment about something else on the observation, I could do that. I can also edit it after the fact in the online version. So some settings to keep in mind, I kind of touched on that, but making observations and uploading them in the field especially will be easier if you let your phone use your location while you're using the app. Let your phone geotag your photos, and let your phone use cellular data. There are ways to turn off cellular data use and still collect all of the basic information in the app, and then when you get to a Wi-Fi system, then you can use it to sync. The problem with not using cellular data is sometimes the identification lists don't come back as accurately, and it can be a little bit more difficult to use. But excuse me, like I said, if you're not particularly interested in or don't need to know exactly what you saw at that moment, just collecting some of the basic information and then uploading it, making final identifications of species and uploading it when you get back into a Wi-Fi situation is perfectly acceptable. Okay, so the website version looks like this, and this is my homepage, and we are going to go, I have to stop sharing this, and we're going to go online and look at this actually on the internet. Leave my tab. Hold on one second. Okay, can you all see my homepage of iNaturalist here?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So there is so much to this website, and we are not going to get through all of it tonight. I just want to give you a basic overview and a basic understanding of how to upload your images, because if you are using a non-phone camera, you're going to find it much easier to upload your images to the website. So if you're using a big digital camera, I use one to do my bird photography, like that's where I'm going to come to upload my images, is to use the web. So we're going to walk through that, but just a few comments here. So you kind of get a list here, and this is not an up-to-date list of my observations. What you get on the homepage is a list of the crowdsourced identification of some things. So some of these things may be really old, like this one's from May of last year, that somebody, it had already been identified and reached research grade, but somebody else went through and added an identification, and that's fine. You'll see that a lot. You'll get multiple identifications for a lot of your projects or a lot of your observations, and it may happen frequently over time. You'll see things pop up that you thought, oh, okay, I forgot I even put that in there. If I click on my observations, then I get a world view map, and I can move this map around just by clicking. I can zoom in by scrolling with my mouse. I can tell it to redo the search in the map, so I only get on this list over here the observations from within this geographic area. I can switch to a grid view, which gives me the photos that I've put in for my identifications or observations, excuse me, or I can switch to the list view. So there's lots of options here about how you can see things. In addition, you can use these filters at the top. So I'm going to get rid of this custom boundary for a second, and we're going to look at the whole world. If I click on filters, I can pick a place This is how I often use this. And you're gonna laugh when I say this, but we're gonna use Panama for a second. And so I'm gonna put that in, and it's gonna give me the Panama countries. And then I was using iNaturalist to figure out where I'd seen a bird first. And so I did this exact search. I picked birds. You can select the categories up here, and I have Panama and update search, and I get a list of all the things that I've submitted from Panama. And I was like, this list is really, really short. I know I have more photos of this from birds when I was on my Panama trip. And I realized that I never uploaded them. And part of the reason I didn't upload them was because I took a lot more videos than still photos, and I'd never gone through and grabbed a screenshot. So a couple of those screenshots is what we're going to use for our practice upload here, so you can see how to do it. But this is the kind of thing, like I use this tool all the time, not so much for looking for things from Panama. That was just a fluke that it happened that way. But I use it for things when I'm looking at the projects here. In geographic areas, I can, select date ranges and see how many birds have been entered, what kind of insects there are. There's all different ways to sort of sort and view your data, which is, I think, really cool. And you can sort of slice it and dice it any way that you want to. So we're going to go up here to this upload button. And we're going to click on that. And this you can either drag and drop or choose your files. And hopefully this is still connected. Yes. I just have these in a folder on my desktop, and we are just going to shift select all of them and hit open. And that's going to pop them in and make them observations. One thing that you will notice about these observations is that none of them have a date or location. And this is because they were from video screenshots. So there's no metadata associated with them. And actually the metadata that is associated with them for a date is actually wrong. And it's really good that iNaturalist is not picking it up, because I did this 4 days ago and I did not see these things 4 days ago. I saw these things in 2021. So this is where we're going to need to put the proper metadata in. But it can be, it's annoying if you use a DSLR that collects GPS data. I highly advise you turn that on and allow it to collect metadata on date and location. My camera only does date, it doesn't do GPS, so I have to do the GPS part, the location part, every single time I upload photos. But there's ways to make it go faster, and so I'm going to show you one. So the first thing I do when I'm doing these things is I look at doing the metadata part first, because that makes me go through all the images to figure out what I need to do. And there's a couple of things that you'll notice here. It may be hard to see in the smaller picture on the screen, but there's actually two different birds in this observation. And we want to make an observation for both birds, but we can't do that in one. So since I've got the green highlight on this, I just hit the duplicate button. Now I've got two of the same picture, and I will be able to identify one bird in one bird in the other, and then they'll both be in there. The rest of these are all okay, except for this last one. This is the same butterfly. This is an underwing view and a topside view. So I want this to be combined into one observation. All I do is click and hold and drag. And now I have one observation with two images in it. So that's like the first level cleanup that I do to make sure that I don't have duplicate photos that are actually the same observation, and then splitting things out if I wanted to. In this case, for example, the bird I'm highlighting here on the red flower, I could split this into two, and I could identify the flower and the bird. I'm not going to do that tonight, just in the interest of time, but I will probably go back and do that at some point. So I would do the same thing. I would just make sure this is selected with the green highlight and hit duplicate. I know from history that it doesn't like the picture of this flower, so I have to go find one of my other pictures to figure out what flower this is. Anyway, sometimes you run into that. The next thing that I do is the metadata piece. So these are both pictures that were taken at the same time in the same location, obviously, because they're the same picture. So I can change, I have two selected now, and I can change the date for both of these by using this tool over here. And I'm just going to type this in because it's going to go faster. And hopefully it's not going to get mad at me. 21. Okay. Now, oh, sorry, I clicked on that too fast. So the date's in there. You can see it's added the date here. Location. Same thing for this. In terms of location, the easiest thing to do is if you have a name for the location, if you've been at a park, a lot of those locations are in here. You absolutely can zoom in on the map and click things as well. In this case, we would have to go all the way down here to Panama and click things. And that if you're searching for a location by name and you're not finding it, I would encourage you to sort of explore the map if you know where you were, a general sense, and then enter it. So in this case, for this picture, it was the, well, there we go, Canopy BNB. When you click on a location and select a location, it's going to give you a circle. And in this case, it's a pretty accurate circle around the area that we were. So I'm just going to leave that alone and I'm going to say update observations. I know the next three were all taken from the same place as well. So I'm going to do the same thing, control. I think it might be alt on max and select, and we're going to do the date over here as well. And this is no, not 2021. Same thing, we're going to click on the location. Now, it's going to bring me, since I already made some observations, it's going to bring me back to the same place that those previous ones were. In this case, it's not the same place. It's Canopy Lodge. And again, this adds, I could zoom in here if I really wanted to, and I could make this circle a little bit smaller since I know that it really was at the lodge, which is this property over here, and sort of center my observation there. This one was a different date. Location. So now you can see we've got two locations on our map. And I could zoom in or I could enter a name, and I'm going to enter a name because I think if this works properly, yeah, it's going to give me this giant circle over half the country, which is not great for identification purposes and location purposes. So this is actually a province in Panama, so it's giving me sort of the whole area of that province. What I want to do is I want to zoom in, and I know you can grab the circle and you can drag it. I know we went to the beach around here, and I know we were in a lot of farm fields and areas over here. So this is probably about as good as I can get for this one. I don't know exactly where we were, because I wasn't driving. I have no clue. So I'm going to use this location, sort of this general area, and update it. And then this last one more is Metropolitan Park in Panama City. I honestly don't remember which part of the park I saw this in, so I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because I know this whole area here is the park. And then we're done. Okay, and then, so now I have all my metadata in and I go back and I start doing the species name and I start selecting what we're doing, what I've identified or what I want to identify here. And so again, we're pretty sure this is in this genus of woodpeckers, and I agree I know this is the red-crowned woodpecker. Now you'll notice when actually, I'm gonna clear that out for a second. It is very, very focused on only this top bird right here. It's not even giving me an option for this back bird. So I'm going to select red crown woodpecker for this one, but it's going to do the same thing. It's only giving me this. You can type in names for species here as well. So I know that the one in the back is a palm tanager. So I'm going to type that in and say, yes, that's my species. This is a Tennessee warbler. This should come up as a social flycatcher. Great-headed chachalaca, even though you can hardly see the bird in this picture. This is a rufous-browed pepper shrike. And then this is one where I have, if we're going to talk a little bit more about what to do if you don't know what it is that you've got a picture of. And in this case, I knew what these birds were. Partly I had a guide that helped identify them. I've known what on the bird list what we saw, and so it was pretty easy to match some of my photos up to what we had gotten on, checked on the bird list that we'd seen and using the field guide at home. In this case, I have looked at these two butterflies backwards and forwards, upside down, forward like crazy. I cannot tell the difference between these two butterflies. If you click on this view, and it might not share this page because of how Zoom works, so I'm not going to do it. But if you click on view, it will take you to other iNaturalist observations of this particular butterfly and this species. And same thing here. And they are very, very similar. And so in that case, you have an option. You can select just the genus and leave it at that and hope somebody comes along and tries to get it to the species level. 9 times out of 10, the first species on the list is the one that's right. So if you don't know, it's a good bet to sort of go with that one. We're going to talk about you want ultimately to get all of your stuff to species identification. And the only way to do that is to pick a species. If you pick genus only, it may sit there forever. Especially in my case, people coming through to update observations and ID observations from the tropics doesn't happen nearly as much as it does from things in North America or Europe for that matter. And so it could sit there forever. So I'm going to put it in as this top one. And somebody can argue with me. Maybe they'll agree with me. We'll see what happens. And it's not going to happen instantaneously. But over the next couple of days, I should probably start seeing agreement or disagreement for any of these species pop in. And so then the last thing that you have to do is just submit 7 observations. And if you're missing something here, it will tell you. It's like you have to have a date, or you missed a location, or you didn't select a species ID for one of them, which can be very possible if you've got 20 or 30 things that you may be updating in here at once, and it's easy to overlook that. So it's nice. It doesn't let you upload mistakes. It won't go any further if you're missing some details. And so there, now it's been added to my observation list, and we'll see what happens. And that's pretty much the only other thing I want to point out. Projects are located under the community tab. So you can click on this and this will take you to a list of all the kinds of projects that are out there, and you can search them. If you have projects of your own that you're running or you've joined, if you click on your little icon over here and go to the projects piece over there, then you'll see all the different projects that you've participated in or that you're running in my case in a lot of these. And let's see, I think that's it for the website right now. Those are the key points. So let me, oh, there's one question here. Yes, there is a size limit, and I can't remember what it is right off the top of my head. They'll tell you if it's too big. Um, there's if you are sizing your photos for anything on iNaturalist, then it will that are for anything on social media, that would be fine for iNaturalist. But you can search within their help section, and it'll tell you what the size limit is. That's a really good question. And if it's too big, it won't upload it, and it'll tell you that you're over the maximum. Um, so that's something definitely to keep in mind. All right, let me share. Let's go back to presentation. Okay. Um, oh, and I forgot to show you one there, but you can see on this right side, there's a forum. So there's lots of kind of things, conversations going on there. There's loads of help under more and under community. There's areas for help and resources and things like that that are very, very useful within the website. And while the app is awesome for quick uploads in the field and quick IDs, if you're really curious to know, hey, I just found this really cool bug, what is this thing? It's great for that. But the website has so much more functionality. So I really encourage you not to ignore the website because it can be really helpful, even if you're uploading most of your stuff from your phone. There's just so much in here that can really, really help you. Okay, so we talked about this. What if I'm not sure what I saw? Well, pick something and ID it anyway. And sometimes you may, so this is where I talked about you can get these, we're not confident enough to make recommendations, but here's our top 10 suggestions. This is a picture of a fly. And sometimes, especially insects, there's so many little tiny details that if you don't get it in a photo, it's really difficult for the system. It may never be identifiable from the picture that you have, first of all. And it's difficult for the system's intelligence function in the background to figure out what it is. And it can't even like get you to a genus. In other cases, it will get you to say this is the genus, and then here's the options. Like I showed you in that's what happened when we were online with most of the things. It came up with, it was pretty sure with a genus and a species list for all of them. And like I said, usually the first one is the right one in most cases. And not always, but it's getting better. And that seems to be the case, particularly with North American things. If you're outside North America, that can be a little bit different. And some of that's just because of the sheer volume of data that's been uploaded from North America. It just works better here. But it's getting better in all parts of the world. Things like City Nature Challenge are really helping that because that's getting a lot of data in there. So upload it and identify it to the highest level that you can give it. So in this case, let's say that you weren't sure which one of these butterflies it was, but you agree that it's a tiger milkweed butterfly. Well, you can just select that genus, and it'll go in that way. Maybe you're not even sure what genus it is, but you know it's a butterfly. You can just type in butterfly and it'll give you the family category for butterflies and moths. And you could just pick that. Actually, I think that even breaks it down a little bit. You can go to the high level butterflies and moths, but I think it will give you an option for butterflies or moths. And so whatever is the highest level that you can get to. If you're really not sure, you can default to like, the basic levels. It's a bird, it's a mammal, it's an insect, and go from there. And the absolute option of last resort is you can leave any ID field blank and put it in as an unknown. And hopefully somebody will look at it and maybe help you figure out what it is. It's rare to do that. And I wouldn't suggest it unless you really can't figure out what to pick. Doing this high level, highest level of bird, mammal, insect, plant type of a thing is better than leaving it blank. But if you have to leave it blank, you can. And put it in as an unknown. And it'll probably shout a warning at you and you can say, yes, I want to do that anyway and put it in that way. but you don't have to be right. And so what you want to try to do is get it as close as you can. When I was showing you on the website, if I clicked on view, that I would be taken to an iNaturalist website of observations of that species. This works the same way here. It's this little I button on the mobile option. It takes you to, as long as you're using cellular data in the field, it takes you to the website for iNaturalist, and it takes you to the page where other observations of this are located. And then you can sort of compare your picture to those pictures. This is actually one of the features that they've said they've added to the new version of the app. So I think now, instead of actually taking you to the website and making you look at the website and trying to compare photos, it will actually bring up comparison photos and keep yours on the screen. So here, I'll have your photo, and then it'll have a number of other photos of things that are from whatever you pick here, to compare it to help you narrow down. And that, I think, would be a really useful tool in the new version of the app. I'm excited to kind of try that out, because this system is a little cumbersome. And honestly, if I'm really questioning it, I just stop trying to make an observation and identification, and I just wait until I get home, because I find it easier to do that on the computer than on my phone when I'm standing in the middle of a field, and trying to compare tiny little pictures of other people's observations. So again, your mileage may vary. Some of it depends on what you're putting in there. What quality of photos. So how to make better observations, take better photos, is really what it comes down to. So get close as you can, for anything that you're trying to take pictures of. If your phone has a macro capability, use it. I had a phone for a long time that didn't have a macro capability, but I actually had an external lens that I could screw on my phone and use for close-up shots of insects and flowers, and it really helped. It really made it easier to identify things, because they get the better the photo, the easier it is to confirm an identification. It's easier for the system to give you an option, and then it's easier for other people to agree with that. Shoot multiple angles. I kind of talked on that. You saw that on the butterfly as well. For plants, the flowers, bark of trees, flowers of trees, leaves of trees, anything that's growing on that plant at that point in time, try to get a good picture of it. Mushrooms, you need a top-down view, a side view, and you need under the gills to truly ID most mushrooms. So if you don't have all three of those kinds of pictures, you may not be able to truly identify what you have, and that's okay. The best thing that you can try to do is take pictures that are sharp and in focus. And this is why I spend more time when I'm in the field, worrying about getting good photos than I do about actually uploading them to the app at that point in time. I make sure that I've got good in focus photos, and then I do all the uploading when I get home, so that I'm just focused on seeing what I can find and then taking good photos of it while I'm out there. Making sure all your metadata is accurate and complete. Being sure, and I say good photos, you don't always have to have great photos. You saw some of those, I mean, they were screenshots from videos, so they weren't perfect pictures, but they were good enough for the system to ID it. This is a photo of a towhee that I took through my backyard, but in my backyard through my dining room window. So it looks really weird, but it's good enough in that case for the system to identify it. If you put in captive or cultivated items, then mark them as such, just to be fair to the system, so everybody knows that. And then we already saw this, but the idea of submitting multiple observation if your photo contains more than one species. So like here with the bug and the flower, should make a duplicate of that and submit it twice, once for the bug and once for the flower, and make it a complete observation. So I can stop here for questions, and then we're going to go into the sort of how it works on the back end, and why we're doing some of the things that we're doing. I'm going to jump in, and if there's any questions that happen, you think of them, jot them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. So what the system wants to do is to get everything to what they call research grade. And we're going to talk about what that means in a second, but there's 3 levels of identification and categorization of the data quality in iNaturalist. Casual is where all observations start. If you're missing any one of these 4 things, or it is a captive or cultivated organism, it will stay as casual the whole time. It will never move further than that. If it has a date, has a location, has photos or sounds, then, and it isn't of a captive or cultivated organism, when you press upload, it will move to needs ID, which looks on your list like this. There's no little flag down here. And in some parts of the system, it will actually say needs ID, and there's a yellow flag. And if it's moved to the next level, you'll see the green flag of research grade. I don't know what casual looks like, honestly, because I don't have any in there. I don't have any captive or cultivated organisms, and everything has the things it needs to, get identified as a research grade observation. So observations become research grade when the community agrees on a species level identification. 2 out of 3 people have to agree. And sometimes it allows it to agree at a non-species level, but most of the time it will stay needs ID until 2 people agree on the species. I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like in a second, because it can be really confusing. And honestly, so again, everything in iNaturalist wants to get their observation to that species level. Everything about iNaturalist cares about the species. And it crowdsources the identification. And the most specific identification takes precedence. So if you put it in down here, it's just a bird as a class, aves. You put it in here in the system. Every time somebody is going to go in there and look at it, they're going to try to move it up the chain to being identified as a cardinal and the species. And you'll see everything happening behind the scenes, and you don't have to do anything to make this happen. It will happen no matter what. And this is absolutely when I first started using iNaturalist, and I didn't understand this, and it sounds funny now, but I got so frustrated because I'm like, I put something in that I knew what it was and I identified it. And then all these people are coming on and agreeing with me. And I'm like, well, duh, that's what I said it was. But if I stopped and thought about it at the time, and now that I understand it more, the system doesn't know that I know that, basically, is what it's saying. And so it wants somebody else to verify that. And that's why we have this community of people crowdsourcing the identification of these things. So in this case, I've uploaded a blurry photo of a green hermit hummingbird, and I've identified it as a green hummingbird. And the first person that came along agreed with me that it was a green hermit hummingbird. And so now it's 2 out of 3 people. Now, in this case, the third person is imaginary. There doesn't need to be a third person because the first 2 people in here, me putting the observation in, and this person identifying and agreeing with my observation. So it moves to 2/3, it moves to research grade. And that's the easiest thing that can happen. When people don't agree is where things can sometimes get complicated. And for the most part, I just let it go on in the background, because if I haven't been sure of what I'm putting in here in the first place, I need somebody else to help me identify it. And this is often the case with insects and other sort of more obscure types of observations, fungi and all of those kinds of things. And so what happens, I typically don't take part in this, but you absolutely can. There are options down here for when somebody suggests an identification. You can agree with them, you can disagree with them, you can add comments. And sometimes people can have pretty lengthy conversations about identification of something on a particular observation. And this is part of what drives that knowledge base forward as well, because, you know, bees are a really good example. A lot of our native bees are really difficult to identify unless you can literally look at parts of them under a microscope. And most pictures in iNaturalist are not pictures of those parts under a microscope. So it's very difficult to get some of them to the species level. They can often get to the genus level, but that's it. And so the conversations that go on around there can be really educating about the kinds of things, one, the detail that you might need to try to identify that in the future, but also just getting a sense of how difficult it can be to actually identify some species ever. And so it's kind of interesting to sort of dive into some of that along the way. So also, don't get frustrated if people don't agree with your identification, because sometimes they won't, and you'll see that go on. And if you really think they're wrong, and they might be, they may be less experienced than you on certain things, and they may be trying to take the identification to a higher level, and you can feel absolutely free to jump in and add your comments and other things that you might have to that identification. Sometimes it helps if you have another picture that you can upload, which you can add another photo after the fact. So if you think you have something else that may clarify something that they're asking about, you can definitely upload another photo as well. I have to say, for the most part, I haven't really had many things that have had that level of conversation. But I know what happens. And don't let that discourage you from participating, because I think that's all part of the system and sort of what it needs to operate in the background. You can engage or you can not engage, and you can just let it go on as you wish. You don't have to, be fully active in that whole process. And so this identification, this person coming in here, they do this. There's a button on the website where you can click identify, and you can go in, say you're a birder and birds of the area. You can go in and say, show me all the birds of Pennsylvania that need identification that are in the system. And then you can go through and start identifying them. If you know flowers really well, or you know mushrooms really well, you can do the same thing. You can pick and choose what you want to try to identify from a specific area or not, and maybe very broad, maybe very narrow, and contribute to those identifications yourself. So second part of communicate, this is, again, we're going to get into that where it's a little confusing. So stick with me here, but say somebody puts an observation in of this thing, red, we're going to call it a bug on a plant. Okay, so Adrienne 4 puts this identification in, and she doesn't know what this is. So she puts it in at a high class, the insecta class. It's just an insect, and that's what I'm going to call it. And that's fine. Don't know where to pick from there. Maybe the AI system didn't give you great choices and you really didn't think it was matching any of those. So it's an insect, and that's what you're going to put it in as. And that's great. So she selects that very last class. So then Bee Bunny comes along and is like, well, yeah, it's an insect, but we can get more specific than that. And it's a ladybird beetle in this family. And so I'm going to pick that and make that suggestion. So on this observation page, it would look like my previous bird one, but that second thing would be Bee Bunny, and it would say ladybird beetles in this family. And the taxon, community taxon 2 out of 3 would not have moved. It would just have 1, because nobody's agreed yet. It's basically counting the 1 of Adrienne 4 when she put it in. And that's where you start. But nobody else agrees yet, so it's not going to move to 2 out of 3 at that point. So Adrienne then looks at the suggestion that Bee Bunny made and was like, oh, okay, I agree with that for sure. So I'm going to say, Adrienne, ignore the left hand of this picture for a second. Adrienne says, yeah, I think it's this 3-banded ladybird. And that could theoretically, that would still leave the taxon ID, community ID at 1, because there's no agreement. We're agreeing on family, but we're not agreeing on species level yet. And after Adrienne puts that in, then three other people come along and say, no, we disagree. This is not a three-banded ladybird. This is a seven-spotted ladybird. And because there's three of them here, there's more than two out of three, in this case, three out of three, all agree that it's a seven-spotted ladybird. So that community taxon would move the observation to research grade because more than 2 out of 3 people agree that it's a seven-spotted ladybird. And that's what iNaturalist would say that picture, that species is. This is where it can get difficult. Sometimes if the differences between those two species might not be so clear and people are arguing about, whether you can even identify it in a picture. Most of them don't go that far. Most of them are pretty straightforward. And so for things that you're going to be doing around here, it's probably not going to be an issue. But sometimes it might. So just be aware. And here Adrienne went back and said, oh yeah, I agree. I put this in. But they didn't even have to do that. They could have just let it sit there with Bee Bunny's ID and waited until somebody else came along and identified the species. So you can gauge your own level of interaction there and what you feel comfortable with and how far, you want to engage with all of these things. It really is trying to build community. And so, it is kind of helpful to get in there and agree and do things. And in this case, if say Bee Bunny had actually identified it as a seven-spotted ladybird, and then Adrienne went in and said, oh, I agree it's a seven-spotted ladybird, then they would have been done. And it would have been 2 out of the imaginary third person, and they could have, everything would move to research grade. So that's why, you're going to see a lot of, when you put a thing in, you're going to see a lot of feedback on your observations. And that's because everything is trying to move to that species level and, 2 out of 3. Sometimes you can't get there. This is an observation. When did I make this? 2020. And it's still sitting in the system. As this tiny little caterpillar. That's the best picture I could get of it. It still needs ID. And I'm absolute, oops. And the people agree with me. There's actually more people on this list agree with me that this is a geometer moth caterpillar, but we don't know which one it is because there's just not enough detail in the picture and it's so small. And you can see here, the community taxon has moved to 2 out of 3 agreeing with this, but because it's not a species level identification, it's not a research grade observation yet. And it probably never will be. And that's okay. It's still in the system. It's going to show up in some things. Like if this is probably something that was at my house, but if this was like on one of our preserves, this would absolutely show up in my project. It would just show up as needs ID. And that's okay. At least I can count this as evidence of moth caterpillars, which I know are very important for birds to eat. And so, it's a good thing that we have it out there. So I think it's not the end of the world that it can't get to research grade, but sometimes you just won't get there. And that's okay too. So I said geoprivacy we were talking about. So the idea of mostly everything goes in default as open. So it's a pretty specific location. You saw the circle. You can sort of make it bigger or smaller and make it a little bit more specific. If you're working in the website version, if you're working in the mobile version, it's taking the GPS coordinates from your phone. So it's pretty specific. You can obscure the geoprivacy. So it creates a block around your observation and then locates the observation somewhere in that block, but it won't be the exact coordinates. And then you can put it in as private and completely obscure it. Private makes it very difficult for researchers to use your data because they don't really know where it came from. And so depending on the project that they're working on, it may be excluded completely. They may reach out to you as a researcher for a specific project to find out exactly where the location was, if you're willing to share that. And even if you've obscured it, researchers may reach out to you directly They'll do it through the online system so that you can share more specific coordinates if you have them, depending on what the research project is, if you want to. You don't have to, but you can sometimes get requests like that. Likewise, all of the pictures go in as open source and with some rights reserved for individuals. When you're in iNaturalist, you can click on the Creative Commons button, the CC button at the bottom of every photo, and you can see what the level of photo licensing is. The idea behind making them open source, it's twofold. If they're open source, iNaturalist pays less of a fee for storing all of them. So it's in our best interest to try to make as many of them open source as we can, because then they pay less to host them, which means the system can stay in operation. If hosting costs get too much, then they're going to have a problem. And the other reason is because people like me who are doing programs who need photos of things from around the area, whatever, different organisms to use as examples in photos, in presentations and things. I can use these photos with, and anybody can use these photos with proper credit to the photographer. And so each person, every photo has the Creative Commons information. And if you're the owner of the photo, you can click on the I. Well, actually, anybody can click on the I to see what rates are reserved. I don't even remember what. I leave this as the default. This is what it is. But if you want to change it as the owner of the photo, you can click on this I button here, and then you can change it for your individual photos to make it more or less open depending on what you want to do. I tend not to put my really, really, really good photos on iNaturalist. I know some people who won't put any photos on iNaturalist because then use it at all because they're worried about people stealing their photos. I've never had my photos show up that I'm aware of in some place. And honestly, most of my photos that I do put on iNaturalist are not that good. So if somebody really wants to steal the photo and use it for something, have at it. It is what it is. But I encourage you to think about keeping them open source because it's going to be easier for other people to use it in the background of the system. So that's all that I have on using iNaturalist, and just a reminder that part of the reason why we were running this training tonight and to show you how to use the system was because of these two events coming up. So City Nature Challenge is a really good opportunity to sort of practice using iNaturalist if you haven't used it before. It runs the 25th to the 28th of April, so it's a Friday to a Monday. That's the time to actually make observations. And then the following week from April 29th to May 4th is the identification phase. So if you can't participate in making observations, maybe you can participate in helping to identify some of the things that were found in our area. That's helpful as well, very much so, actually. Excuse me. And then May 5th, the results are announced. So City Nature Challenge actually started more as a competition between cities. It really was. And people took it very seriously. I think it was kind of during COVID that kind of shifted, and it became sort of less about the competition part of it and more just about documenting biodiversity, which it always was. But, people were like kind of serious about being, the best city in the region or the best city of their size. We participate for Philadelphia. Philadelphia City Nature Challenge consists of all the counties that touch Philadelphia. So it's Delaware, Montgomery, Bucks in Pennsylvania, and then in New Jersey, Burlington, Camden, and Gloucester all compete for Philadelphia as a city in this event. So anything that you put, any observation that you put in during April 25th to the 28th from those locations is going to get pulled into the Philadelphia City Nature Challenge project and identified and counted towards our city. You can compete. You can participate in a number of different ways. You can absolutely participate on your own in any of those areas, any of the counties, Philadelphia County and any of the counties that touch it around it. You can participate in one of the Philadelphia City Nature Challenge events. If you go on, search on Philadelphia City Nature Challenge website, there's an events tab and it lists all the events in the area. I'm leading one at our Willow Lake Preserve on Friday night, Friday evening. But there's a number of other events around the area for that weekend that you could participate in as well. And then lastly, the Bio Blitz on June 7th at Gwen and Friends meeting from 9 to 12. Page and journey work and Wissahickon trails, and then literally just using iNaturalist to document the biodiversity at the site. And I'm really excited about that because I'm hoping that we can sort of build on that over time and really kind of document what's going on at that particular site. So that'll be a good kickoff to being able to do that and start building that knowledge base as well. So that's all I have. I saw one thing come in on the chat question wise. Oh, just a thank you. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions that I can answer?
Thank you very much for doing this, Christy.
Sure. I'm going to stop sharing here. Actually, stop.